much
You bet.
for being a guest on our show.
Happy to be here.
And what I wanted to do is I wanted to start off by giving you a brief minute to introduce a little bit about your background and how you got into this whole field of coaching that you're doing, and then the vision that you have moving forward with it.
Cool. Starts 20 plus years ago. I'd been in IT for 20 years and then volunteered at a nonprofit organization. And to be a volunteer there, you had to go through a training. And it was the first time I'd been through one of those trainings that just reached inside and touched you. And I thought, I love that. I'd like to be you in that chair. So I volunteered to be the trainer of the volunteers coming in, and ended up training over 300 or 400 people the process of doing that. The thing I loved was how you're watching people's eyes light up when seeing something they hadn't seen before about how life works and how they work, etc. So, and the organization itself did great work for families that had catastrophic illnesses. So that's
what drew you to that initially?
A good friend of mine that actually started the organization. He had a wife that died of cancer and he had no support during the process. And he said, there's got to be a better way for other people to go through this. And he found one in California called the Center for Attitudinal Healing. And he started a chapter in Houston. So, and then I knew him from other settings. So I said, if Herb's going to play, I want to play. So that's how that all went. So
that's interesting how small things like that work out. And I know for me, and you know the story as well as I do, when I started building Overcoming Odds, the nonprofit, it all started with a simple blog post. And I think, like in your case, this opportunity might have been something where your heart was able to connect with somebody else's, and then that helped you realize, hey, Stan, you shouldn't be doing this. This is your ultimate goal here, and that is to help other people, to help them dive into themselves. What is the vision that you have moving forward with your project, which has been going on for 20 plus years?
Yeah.
Right?
It's basically, I just love helping business owners and entrepreneurs design a great business and a great life. And what I coach is the person, not the business. Because I'm in the best quality I'm looking for is somebody aware enough to know that they're the biggest block to their success.
At all times.
If they're awake to that, then we can work. And underneath that, they're also the biggest opening for success. So that's the area I would love to work in, and I do it individually and I do it in organizations. So that's I just want to keep doing the ones that show up in front of me.
That's amazing. I love that story because I think that's a perfect segue into today's topic, which is really staying focused on yourself in order to help you get to that next level. So the question that I would like to open this conversation up with is, how do you eliminate the distractions, the daily things that kind of drag you back and say, hey, there's something more, there's something else within life that you got to explore, or this is something. So how do you maintain that focus? And I guess the question before that is, how do you prioritize things within your mind?
Okay. To me, the anchor post is like, where am I trying to go in whatever time frame I'm in? I've got daily goals, I've got weekly, I've got monthly, and I've got lifetime goals, and the span goes there. And for me, it typically is I'm looking at the first of the month on what can I move the needle forward on, and then I break that down to this week, and then I typically try to prioritize the top 3 actions I can take that day to move those projects forward.
Interesting.
Underneath that, though, is like you said, is how am I taking care of myself in order so I can show up on the playing field the way I want to show up. And a funny place to look is what I call extreme self-care. And I'll come at it from several directions. Inside The One Thing by Keller Williams, or Roy Keller and Jay Papasan, The One Thing, they talk about the 4 thieves from effectiveness. And one of them is inability to say no, which speaks to when a sparkly distraction comes by.
That's a lot of people that I've seen.
Yep. 2, an environment that does not support your goals. Anywhere from I'm in my office and it's not organized and I reach to where it ought to be and it's not, then it pulls me off and I'm in this, potentially in this squirrel cage of, you dummy, you shouldn't have done that, going down the hole of that. Or I can have it where I want it and find it from there. So the environment, I have another way to say that I got from another line of work is your environment always wins. So kind of let that one soak in, because it's like if you don't have your environment set up to support you. One example is like I do really well if I'm surrounding myself with great people. You're one of those that every time I have a conversation with you, I notice I'm playing a better game when I finish it. So I'm smart enough to know that I'm drawn to that more and more. Or I'll leave the people out of my life on a regular basis that drain my energy. Because it's, again, my ability to say no to that and invite myself into energy that allows me to play my game better, I can touch more people. The third is poor health habits, which gets back to this tube we walk around in. Yeah. And the simple three legs of that stool are the ones you normally think of as diet and exercise, but there's sleep also. Wrapping around back to the 9 environments, one of those is spiritual. And for me, spiritual is being outside or being around outside, sitting on our back deck looking out at this wonderfully gnarly tree. And this tree just sits there and bees. Like the tree's not trying to do anything frenetic, which just calms me down and I can be present then. Or I'm out walking. The focus, I'm jumping around now, so just hang on, I do that. If I'm out with the focus of I want to get my exercise, and I'll see some big tree I want to kind of stop and look at and enjoy, if I'm awake enough, I'll notice I've shifted from taking care of my body to I'm now in a spiritual conversation. And then if I'm through that, okay, I need to get back to walking again, I'm changing that conversation or that focus to exercise again. And it's just noticing where am I pointed? What folder have I got open, if you will? In this case, that domain is one of exercise. That also is body, which is underneath that or over that, or spiritual, which is something outside of normal life. So I'm kind of getting ahead, but one of the ways to stay focused is to keep being clear on, okay, what am I focused on right now? Like you said earlier before we got on the call. If you get clear on what your priorities are for the day, and then you pick out, I'm working on getting hotel space, and only that. And the other folders I could open, I've got off to one side, either literally or in my mind, they're out of the way.
Your chances are that much higher at accomplishing that task, absolutely.
And life happens.
That's another thing we have to accept and deal with on a daily basis.
I passed a guy changing a tire a minute ago. So he could be mumbling about being late for a meeting, or he could change the tire in an efficient fashion. So or make a quick phone call, I'll be late, so I'm not worried about what they're going to think. So take care of what you need to take care of.
Who would you say has had the biggest impact on you when it comes to developing this mindset? Because in my eyes, you've, in a way, surgically broke this down as far as, if this is the task, these are the actions I have to take in order to make that happen. You could also just be very fortunate in figuring that out yourself through your own trial and error. But are there people in your life that have kind of had an impact on you and helped you shape that particular mindset?
Big time, lots of them. Who comes to mind is a colleague of mine that's done a lot of work with Fernando Flores' work. Fernando was a prisoner in Chile's, he was a political prisoner, spent 3 years in there and was able to focus in a way that he connected to the guards in a way they kept providing him books, and he almost had a PhD when he finished 3 years of prison. With that kind of rigor, in that kind of setting, Mandela comes to mind as another example people know. What he was able to do from that perspective is ridiculous. So in this case, Patty Shull, Fernando Flores, Linda Starr, all three of those have touched me very well. I could go on forever with people who've touched me that way.
Do you study their individual routines, or how do you approach someone who you are genuinely interested in? I'm assuming that a lot of it, for example, you pick a person, right? You admire certain skills about that particular person. Then do you dive into that, and then more so, how do you extract what you need from that particular person?
Yeah. What I noticed I've been doing the last 5 years is really like, who did you study? Where'd you get the idea from? Underneath that, I think I realize each of us is unique, and if I'm not following my own voice inside this field of study, then I'm missing the mark. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Going to another person, there's a commercial broker friend of mine in town that took on a field of study that he was very focused before, but I watched him really take it to a whole nother level. And his business and his personal life both went up like crazy because he really just jumped in with both feet. And one of the more successful commercial brokers in town now. So that's does that answer your question?
Absolutely. I know that in this may be a slight tangent off of the original topic, but I think it does connect to the overall thing. Part of that staying focused and getting yourself motivated, you also have to accept the fact that failures do happen. Just like you said before, life happens.
Yeah.
And that's not necessarily, I think, a failure, but how do you define failure in your eyes? Because I know that based on my experience, it's something that has to happen, and I think the sooner you accept that fact, that the more you're able to grow within that.
Yeah.
How do you define that, and is there a story that comes to mind as far as, some of your greatest failures, or people that you saw fail along the way where it clicked you and it said, hey, it's just part of the process. I just got to accept it and go with it.
I'm one of those who is all about having great relationships, especially the close relationships. And I failed in my relationship with my ex-wife. We still love each other. My current wife of 30 years and she are good friends, have been on a cruise together. So they're both there, but I realized out of that failure, I learned a lot about who am I in the failure? What was my steering wheel on why the relationship didn't work? And I basically picked up a trait in my family setting is to be considerate. So the way I practiced being considerate was putting myself last, which is different than what I talked about earlier of taking extreme self-care of me so that I can play life well and take care of people around me better. Because if I'm not selfish enough in the big sense of that word, then I'm not available to be in this relationship fully right now with you. Yeah. So I've now been married 30 years with Patricia. I can't make it up any better than I've got it. And I get goosebumps when I say that because it's true. So that's a biggie. The other thing I've watched a lot, but it's only kind of coming clear now, is realizing what we're playing inside such a bigger game than we can make up that we don't know what failure and success is, if that makes any sense.
A little bit,
Yeah, so where's an example? A good business friend of mine, he had successfully sold a business idea to the CEO of a company, and they were about to execute the deal when the CEO had the audacity to die. That's what they called a failure. My friend then sold it to the next 3 CEOs in that same organization, and none of them stayed in office long enough for him to really get the deal pulled. So he finally got to the point of this last CEO that he was talking to, it's like, And he basically called him up and said, I'm not going to play this game anymore. You're either going to say yes or no. And he was betting the whole farm on that. And they executed the sale, and it's one of 3 businesses he's built successfully and sold. So it looked like an awful failure for 3 or 4 years.
Uh-huh.
But on the other end of it, he learned a whole lot about how to build an organization, how to put a team in place. And then he's gone on and built 3 other businesses since that time. So I answer what you're asking?
How do you manage relationships and how to create them?
How do you keep stepping out yourself?
Exactly.
Yeah, holding the vision or knowing when to stop.
Yeah. And with something like that, what's interesting is because of the fact that he was told no so many times along the way, he found a way to deal with discouragement.
Mm-hmm.
And then within that, I think that's where your positive self-talk and everything develops. And so I think the more you do it, actually, and I've come to a point now where it's kind of enjoyable to get told no.
Say more about that.
The other day when I was calling at different hotels, and I had to be honest, reach at least 80, maybe even over that. And every single one I would call, and I would try and revise a little bit as far as why they said no.
Yeah.
And in most cases, I would actually ask them. I would say, why did you say no? How can I improve? And I got a lot of laughter. I got a lot of people saying, well, he's actually trying to get this. And I think, and then once I hit that first yes, it just made perfect sense in my mind. It's there you go.
Yeah.
That's what you were striving for.
Yeah.
So just because it happened on call 73 or 75, whatever it may be, that doesn't matter. That's just a number of people we had to get through in order to get to that one. And then from there, the reason why I say it's because it becomes enjoyable is you hit that yes, and you use that as the foundation.
Yeah.
So every other no that comes along the way, you just know it's just part of the process.
To me, to kind of reframe what you just said to me is you use curiosity in a more and more effective way as you went along because you learned what it's like to be in that chair.
Yeah.
So you had their concerns in mind along with your concerns.
Yep.
And they're getting heard,
and
so are you. And then you got a possible dance that can happen with people.
Exactly.
One of the best gifts I've ever been given was through my coaching training is to really hone my curiosity. Probably the best tool I've got. And the more I don't think hopefully I'll never graduate in that school of getting better at that. One of the things I learned through Fernando Flores' work, I think there's 3 levels of beginnership in any skill you want to pick up, which gives me freedom to I am a beginner, so I don't have to be perfect right away and think this since I failed, then I'm doomed. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So, and the 3 levels of beginnership go up to eventually mastery. But I think mastery is an unending trail also.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
What are the 3 levels?
I can't articulate them clear enough to really make sense of it for our conversation this morning.
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it. That's interesting how if you approach it with that type of mindset, the process of attaining something actually does become easier. In a way.
But for me, in your conversation with each one of the people in the hotels, you were bumping up your skill at whatever level you were. So I'm playing better game now.
Yeah.
And then let's recollect and see what I've really learned in the process now. Okay, I'm going to the next part of my 3 things you talked about of opening up this conference.
Exactly.
Same opening now, but I start ready and curious about how do I best speak this to you so it makes sense for both of us.
Yeah, and something that you brought up at the very beginning of all this is helping people understand that they are unique. So one of the ways I think you can do that is allow them to be heard.
Yeah.
So once you allow them to be heard, and in this case, one of the things I've learned is if you approach them with a genuine enough side, and then you give them the freedom to speak, then the chances are that much higher.
Yeah.
Because then they feel like they're not pressured, they can be themselves,
Yep.
and then they just share part of their self.
Yeah.
And then you get to kind of figure out, okay, where is my role within this conversation? What type of question do I need to ask? Where do I plug in? And so then it becomes a dialogue.
Yeah.
Rather, I'm here, here's my question, and then as soon as you get the no, it's like, well, on to the next one, I suppose.
There's two things afoot here. One's vulnerability and one's intimacy. Because the sooner you make it safe for them to be real with you, then you've got a real conversation going on, as opposed to I'm posturing because I'm part of the filter from somebody that you need to get to.
Correct.
Because my job is to keep nonsense calls from coming in, for example.
True.
So if I can get over there and help this person do their job, then it's a dance together. We're both moving down.
A win-win.
Yeah.
Final thought for today's episode, and that is, who or what are you grateful for?
I was thinking about that. Curiosity comes from, and I'll wrap it together with kind of a fun spirit, is my dad. He could talk to a rock and the rock would talk back. And I was just around that all my life, and he had fun all the time. And it was just like, who wouldn't want to do that? So there's that. Staying in the same backyard. Mother, the considerate. The considerate one was also serves me a lot because it does allow me to get over there. And whenever I have that muscle working in a balanced sort of way based on what I said earlier, then the connection is easier and safer for all parties concerned, and a lot of work can get done. This sounds odd, even to me, but I'm grateful that I'm trusting myself more. My intuition's good if I let it, I can see it and let it play. I'll reach out and call somebody just because they popped to mind, and all of a sudden they're like, oh, I just thought of you, and some channel opens up that I couldn't have made up.
Out of the blue stories pop up.
Yep.
Amazing. Well, Stan, thank you so much
bet.
for being on the show and being such a wonderful guest.
Thanks. What a treat.